Have you ever wondered what the Sacred Heart of Jesus means? Why is this devotion so important to millions of people around the world? You may have seen the image of a radiant heart, surrounded by thorns, with a cross at its top, and wondered what this deeply revered symbol in Christian tradition truly represents. Today, I want to invite you to pause and reflect with me on this symbol so full of meaning. What is behind that heart? Why has it become a symbol of love and mercy? And more importantly, how can it impact our daily lives? When we talk about the Sacred Heart of Jesus, we're talking about much more than just a religious image or a superficial devotion. We're talking about a deep message, a call to live the unconditional love that Jesus showed to humanity. It's a heart that beats strongly, a heart full of compassion, sacrifice, and a generosity with no limits. But beyond its beauty, what does this symbol truly mean for you and for me today? The devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus has a history that goes back centuries, but its message remains alive, vibrant, and relevant in our lives. This devotion began to take shape in the 17th century when a young Carmelite named Saint Margaret Mary Alacoque began to have visions in which Jesus showed her his heart, full of love and suffering for humanity. During these visions, Jesus asked her to promote the worship of his Sacred Heart, urging people to venerate this heart as a symbol of his infinite love for all of us. What is most interesting is that this heart is not only a symbol of love, it is also a symbol of suffering and sacrifice. The heart of Jesus is not depicted in an idealized or perfect way. It is surrounded by thorns, reminding us of the painful wounds Jesus suffered out of love for us. This suffering is not meaningless suffering, but suffering with a purpose, the redemption of humanity. The thorns speak to the pain that Jesus endured at the hands of men, but they also invite us to reflect on the suffering of so many people in the world, so many wounded hearts that need the healing only God's love can offer. And it's not just the suffering that speaks to us from this heart, but also its fire. The fire surrounding the Sacred Heart of Jesus symbolizes the burning love he has for us. This fire is an invitation to live that love fully, to not settle for a superficial life, but to open our hearts and allow the fire of that divine love to transform our existence. When we look at that flame, we're not just seeing a symbol, but a call to live with passion, to give ourselves without reservation, to be light in the midst of darkness, just as Jesus was. This heart is also a symbol of mercy. Jesus, throughout his life, showed infinite mercy to those who suffer, the excluded, the sinners. His heart knows no limits when it comes to forgiving, healing, and restoring. When contemplating this heart, we can feel called to live with the same mercy toward others, to forgive even when it's hard, to love even when it seems there's no reason to do so. The Sacred Heart invites us to look at our neighbors with the eyes of Jesus, to recognize in every human being a beloved child of God. Throughout history, this devotion has grown, and more people find comfort and hope in the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Through worship, prayers, and sacrifices offered in honor of this heart, many have experienced profound transformation. This heart reminds us that, although we live in a world full of suffering and pain, there is a love that surpasses everything, a love capable of healing our wounds and bringing peace to our hearts. It reminds us that we are not alone, that there is a God who loves us with an eternal love and is always ready to embrace us, no matter our faults. But how can we apply the message of the Sacred Heart of Jesus to our daily lives? We live in a world that often seems cold, impersonal, and distant. The daily routine can strip us of the ability to love as Jesus taught us. However, the Sacred Heart invites us to open our hearts once again. It challenges us to love beyond barriers, to go beyond our own limitations, and to reflect the mercy of Jesus in our daily relationships. It asks us not only to venerate this heart from a distance, but to make it our own, to imitate it in our everyday lives. One of the most beautiful aspects of the Sacred Heart is its call to self-giving. Jesus gave himself completely, without reservation, for love of us. This self-giving, though painful, is also a source of life and hope. The invitation we are given is to live that self-giving in our own lives. It can be difficult, even uncomfortable, but like Jesus, we are called to give ourselves for others, to serve, to be humble, to forgive, to love unconditionally. In doing so, we not only follow the example of Jesus, but we also experience the peace and joy that come from living according to the heart of God. This devotion also calls us to action. It's not just about passive contemplation, but about active commitment to the world around us. The love of the Sacred Heart should lead us to act, to do good, to seek justice, to alleviate the suffering of those around us. Jesus didn't just love us with words, but with deeds. His love was translated into concrete actions. He healed the sick, forgave sinners, fed the hungry, comforted the afflicted. And we, as disciples of Christ, are called to do the same. Every small act of love is a reflection of that infinite love that flows from the Sacred Heart. As I reflect on all this, I wonder, what can we do today to draw closer to the heart of Jesus? How can we live more authentically and fully the love that has been shown to us? Perhaps the answer isn't in a grand action, but in the small daily gestures, a gesture of forgiveness, a sincere smile, a selfless act of service. Because, in the end, the Sacred Heart doesn't just call us to adore it, but to live it. I invite you to reflect on this. What does the Sacred Heart of Jesus mean to you? How can you live this love in your daily life? Perhaps the answer is to open your heart, just as Jesus did, and allow His love to transform you, guide you, and propel you to do good. And now, as I conclude, I leave you with this question. Are you willing to follow the example of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, to love in the same way, to give your heart generously, to live with mercy? In the end, it all comes down to this. The heart of Jesus invites us to live from love, a love that knows no limits and that, just like Him, calls us to give ourselves completely. Think about it, and may God bless you today and always. Amen.